this video I am going to talk about anxiety. And I'm basically going to talk about how I managed anxiety in my life and how I managed to get from a state of constant worrying to a state of basically feeling calm most of the time. So the type of anxiety I'm talking about, because of course there's multiple kinds of anxiety disorders and ways that anxiety can affect your life. What I'm talking about is when your brain kind of wants to worry about something all the time. So it's like, normal people without anxiety disorder would only feel anxious when there's real threats, when something's really wrong, for example, when they are really in danger. And then someone with anxiety disorder might constantly feel fear about something small or unimportant, but their brain kind of tells them that they should be afraid or that they should feel anxious about it, even though that's not necessary. So it's this kind of thing where your brain wants to be worried about something all the time. It's probably something in your daily life, oh, I'm worried that this thing might go wrong. Something like I'll say something wrong, I'll do something wrong. So if you deal with this, there's ways to fix that. And I'm going to talk about how I managed to fix it for myself. So I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to talk from my own experience. And I'm also going to discuss a few scientific papers that deal with this subject that I feel like they explain why what I did worked for me and how anxiety affects your brain. So first I'm going to show a simple drawing. Well, it's not really a drawing, I guess, but you could divide your brain in two parts, like the cognitive brain and the emotional brain. And part of the cognitive brain is the prefrontal cortex, which also involves making decisions. So when you yourself make decisions, this happens in the prefrontal cortex. And then the amygdala is part of your emotional brain, and multiple studies have found that anxiety is generally associated with overactivity of the amygdala, where basically your emotional brain is overreacting and giving you way too much anxiety. And the thing is that the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are connected with each other, but the strength of this connection varies between people, and it was found that people with anxiety generally have a connection between these two areas that's weaker. Okay, so remember that. So this area could potentially control the amygdala. So this is about rationalizing things, like when you see danger, and it's real danger, your cognitive brain confirms it, and it's this is real danger, It makes sense that I feel scared right now. But whenever something is not something you should be afraid of, you should be able to shut it out. You should be able to rationalize, okay, I have no reason to be afraid of this, and then your emotional brain is supposed to calm down. And that's part of this connection. And the stronger this connection is, the more easily you'll be able to control the anxiety and kind of just stop it when you know that it's irrational, that it's useless. And I have to add, it's specifically a certain area in the prefrontal cortex that's called the medial prefrontal cortex. And so it was found that the strength of a pathway between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex predicted differences between people in anxiety, namely a higher pathway strength predicted lower anxiety. So there's evidence for this theory. I'm going to explain now how I learned to manage my anxiety. I basically accidentally found out that this worked, because back when I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, I had no clue what it was. So like, no one had told me about the existence of anxiety disorder. So I tried to solve it on my own because, I couldn't live a normal life with it. First of all, what you need to do is you need to recognize how it feels. So like, you really need to be able to recognize when are you affected by anxiety and when are you not. It kind of has to do with like, do you feel like really calm, or do you feel really anxious? And it should be easy to recognize that feeling of anxiety. It's like a feeling of fear and unease. You just can't relax. You generally don't feel happy in that moment. You're occupied with a worry, and you probably are not able to focus on something else with your full attention because it's distracting you. So then, whenever you're feeling really anxious about something, and the problem is, of course, that this might be all the time or like really often, but whenever this is the case, you need to tell yourself not to trust it and not to listen to it, not to believe it. It's a bit about rationalizing things. It's like, it's not about repressing any anxious thoughts. It's never good to repress anything, but like, it's more about any anxious thoughts, just let them pass by. The most important thing is don't engage with them. Don't let them influence your behavior. Just be like, okay, I'm feeling anxious, but I'm like going on with my day. And even if your brain is like, oh, you should worry about this, you should worry about this, then tell yourself like, no, I'm not gonna actively worry. I'm just gonna go on with my day and not pay attention to this actively. So don't try to come up with solutions for this problem. For example, if you're like, this is gonna go wrong tomorrow, how do I fix it? What can I do? Like, no, like if it's anxiety, just ignore it. And ignoring it, not paying attention to it might feel scary, because maybe you think that you need to be equipped to solve this problem, whatever it is. You might think that there's some truth in it, That's why it scares you, because you're like, but this is going to go wrong. But even though anxiety is often caused on real fears and stuff, it's usually that you're worrying about something that really doesn't matter that much. It's like you think that it matters, but it doesn't. If it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. And even if you really think that it does, even if your anxiety is like so serious that you really think that things are going to go horribly wrong, which like, yeah, it's possible, because it can really affect you. It can make you really nervous, and it can affect your whole behavior and stuff. But you have to realize that paying attention to this anxiety is not going to solve it. You might have the illusion that the longer I think about it, the bigger chance I have to solve it. That's not true, because the longer you think about it, the more nervous you get, the more you're focused in on it. So that's not going to solve the problem at all. It's not going to help. So if it would have gone wrong with you not paying attention to your anxious thoughts, then it would likely also have gone wrong if you did pay attention to it. It's like, it's not gonna help. The only thing that can help you in the end is if you manage to calm the anxiety down, making you in your entirety just feel calm and more in control of yourself, not feeling nervous. And then anxiety won't control you that much anymore, and you will have full control. You'll be calm, and when you're calm, in the moment, then you can make rational decisions, and you don't panic. So there's a way smaller chance of things going wrong. So that's the end goal. So remember, when something you think is really something you should be worried about, then remember that paying attention to it is not going to help. It's like some things might matter. If you're afraid of like causing an accident or something, then sure, it might matter. But getting more and more anxious is not going to solve that. And secondly, it might also be that you're worried about something that's trivial. It's like you feel like it matters. For example, like, oh, maybe I will embarrass myself. For example, I'm gonna go with the classic example of like doing a presentation in front of people. Maybe you're afraid that you really don't know what to say and everything's gonna go wrong and people are going to laugh at you. Then you have to rationalize, like, why do I care? Part of it might also be rooted, for example, in that you're maybe just insecure or something. But why do you care? Like, even if you fail, it's okay with such things. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change who you are as a person. Everyone fails sometimes at stuff. No one's perfect. So, like, it's okay if you fail. It's not something you should be worried about. It's not necessary. It's something trivial. So then, in time, if you learn to, like, not engage with these thoughts and just not take them seriously, you might find yourself calming down, okay? So hold on to that and remember that feeling of, like, being completely calm, no worries at all. That's supposed to be how you should feel at all times. Unless, of course, you're really in danger, but like, you should aim to feel like that at all times because it's not worth it, okay? It's like, nothing is worth feeling that fear. You might be made to believe that it does. Like, for example, if I fail at something at my job once, then it ruins my reputation, and so it's worth worrying about. But the thing is, nothing is worth being unhappy, okay? The most important thing is that you feel happy and calm. It's not worth being unhappy for. And if you're calm, you will also be able to make the right decisions. It's not like it's going to make you fail more often. Actually, being nervous is going to make you fail at stuff because you have less control. So being calm is only going to help you in the end. So remember that you never have to rely on your anxiety for anything. Because when you have to find a solution to a problem, your intuition will figure it out. You can figure it out on your own with no anxious feelings when you're feeling calm. Sometimes it might take a while before you actually feel calm, and you might just need to wait before you're at that state, which is really important. Never feed into it, never engage with that anxiety. And it becomes easier over time. In the beginning, it might feel really unnatural to do this because your brain is really trying to make you believe, that you should be anxious, that you should care. But over time, you're trying to rewire your brain. You're training your brain to have more control. So I want to go back to the brain stuff I just explained and like connect it to that. So like, the thing is that your amygdala is overreacting and you need to be able to tell it to stop. So what I think is that this way of training yourself is, I think, a way to like strengthen the connection between your prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And when this connection is stronger, you have more control. It will be way more easy to say, this isn't rational, so I'm going to stop worrying, and then you'll feel calmer. So like, it's about making that connection stronger. I think the more often you manage to calm down, the more often you do that, I think that strengthens the connection. So yeah, that's at least what I think is the most likely explanation. You have to become like those people without anxiety who, when they will be anxious about something that doesn't make much sense, they're just like, that doesn't make sense. Whatever, I'll dismiss it. So also remember that rewiring your brain is not going to be done in like one day. It's gonna take time. It has to do with how frequently you manage to do this. So the more you practice this, the faster it's going to be solved, but it's still gonna take a while because it's not easy. Like our brains show plasticity, but it's still not easy, and it takes time to change what happens. So remember that. Don't be disappointed when it doesn't work immediately or when it's really hard, because that's normal, depending on how bad your anxiety is. But you just need the conviction to do this, and it's worth it. So the last thing I want to mention is about cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think that I basically did a form of cognitive behavioral therapy on myself. It's supposed to involve like efforts to change thinking and behavioral patterns. And there's also papers that say that cognitive behavioral therapy can strengthen the connections between the amygdala and cognitive control brain regions, potentially providing enhanced top-down control. And I think that really indicates that's how you can reduce anxiety. And that's all I want to say. So I really hope that this can help anyone who deals with anxiety, either through just improved understanding about what happens in your brain, or maybe through like providing you with a method to try and reduce your anxiety. Because I know that depending on how bad it is, it can make you really unhappy, and it's not worth living with it, And it can be really difficult to solve it. And I will provide the links to the papers I mentioned in the description. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.